Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Conversations. Now, we often talk about the golden handcuffs, that feeling of just being trapped by our high income career. But there's another profound trap that many of my clients face, and it is the feeling that we've lost our identity, that we've lost our ambition. To be honest, that feeling that we've lost our very selves once we transition to motherhood. Well, today we're exploring a concept that every high achieving woman needs to consider if they're thinking of motherhood or if they're currently experiencing motherhood, and they need to understand. And this was new to me. In fact, I wasn't even sure how to say the word, but our guest today has helped me explore the idea of matrescence. So, just the Coles Notes version, just the same way as adolescence is a transition from child to adult, matrescence is that radical identity shift, and boy, is it radical, that happens when we shift from woman to mother. So, my guest today is Ankita Callahan, and she is a workforce strategist. She's a PhD student. She is a matrescence coach. And if that's not enough, she is a mom who is helping women navigate that intersection of career and caregiving. So, we're going to discuss a few things. First, why having it all is a systemic myth, how to navigate that internal becoming without losing your professional edge, and why redefining wealth is really the key to surviving and thriving in this season of your life. So, Ankita, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for the sweet introduction. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. And it's a good one because, like I shared, the idea of matrescence is experienced by so many of us, but we have never actually had a name for it. Let's unpack this just a little bit. Can you explain, I guess, in your words, what the experience of matrescence is like? What does it involve?
Totally. Yeah. And I'll speak about my own experience and how I got to the word. Um, might maybe meant much like a lot of your listeners, I would define myself as a high achieving woman, right? Prior to motherhood, I was chasing titles. I worked in advertising, in consulting, and for me, success meant all that external validation, finances, titles, climbing that career ladder. Then I became pregnant, and I continued that. Journey until I had my son. And then I took my, parental leave. And during that parental leave, I mean, I experienced an unraveling of my identity, of who I was becoming that I've never experienced before, right? Like externally, now maybe folks saw me as mother being added to what, like another part of my resume. I was a successful mom. You listed it as just at the intro, like PhD student, mom, um, strategist, whatever. And that felt good still. But internally, I was like, oh my God, who am I?
Yeah.
I can't manage being a PhD student. I'm awake at 2 a.m. trying to understand how to breastfeed my child. I feel
Mm.
very alone. I feel very isolated. And after navigating all of those changes, bodily, hormonal, socially, losing friends, gaining friends, losing finances, there's so many shifts that you experience through motherhood. I came back and sat at my laptop, back at my office. That was kind of like a representation of my old self. And I didn't know what to do with myself. The first 2 weeks of work, I literally like didn't know where to start. My old self would have dove right back into networking, dove right back into like building my business, doing my work. And I was just like, I don't even care about this. Do I care about this? What is ambition? Like, am I even driven? Am I failing at being a successful woman? Um, and that's when I realized, and I had the fortune of being able to find the word matrescence and understanding what was happening. And it's not that I was failing at being a successful woman. It was actually that I was trying to I was becoming a new woman. I was becoming a new person. I was grieving and not understanding the loss of my old self. I was still trying to hold on to it. Whereas actually, I was in this transition. I was in matrescence from my old self to navigating all of these shifts, much like adolescence into adulthood, like you said, into this new version of myself that included motherhood.
Yeah, it is profound because I guess we've been nurtured, we've been socialized to see ourselves in certain ways. And with the pressure to be mothers, which is something that so many of us feel like all around us, there's this pressure first to become a mother, but nobody explains what happens to us when that actually takes place. So, how would you kind of identify the difference between lose that loss of, I'm going to put it in quotes and say loss of ambition because I don't
Mhm.
actually think it's a loss of ambition. How would you kind of explain that transition, that difference between a woman thinking I've lost my ambition, I'm no longer a great corporate citizen, to or and evolving her values? Where is the differentiator? What's that line, and how can she identify what actually it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the differentiator and how she can kind of like understand it is in it's in the answer to me is like in the system and in societal values. We value societally a lot being productive, being efficient, and we are trained, we are like for years our careers are valued and they're our identities, especially in the countries that we live in, right?
Yeah.
People often ask the first question they ask you is, what do you do? And that is your defining moment of who you are. So when for decades you're defined by your career and you have placed your career at the very top of the totem pole of what defines you, it's really hard to all of a sudden introduce motherhood, which, in the program that I was a part of, Mama Rising, there's a concept of matrescence called competing devotions. And it's that for so many decades, our devotion has been so tied to our careers.
Mhm.
And morally, careers are, they've been defined as your moral calling. Whereas motherhood is a similar, if not more profound calling, but there's no space, no language, no value that's placed in the same way. No one asks you, like, how are you as a mom? Or how is that going? How are you balance? No one asks you about your motherhood journey the same way and with the same interest and the same value as what title you are. Are you a CEO? Are you a VIP? Whatever it is.
Yeah, and it's hard to quantify successful mothering,
Yeah.
whereas we have metrics that are given to us and consistently checked for our corporate success. We look at salaries, we look at titles and promotions. These things help us measure externally our success in corporate, but how do you measure that motherhood success? Okay, the child's alive, all is well. Well, no, the bar is pretty steep and no one actually gives you a measuring stick. So it's interesting that you kind of landed on that there because it's an undefined goalpost for a lot of us.
Yeah, and I would actually say that not only it's undefined in a, I would say there are metrics socially, but they're actually often quite negative, right? So from the start of
Mm.
your motherhood journey, it's like, are you able to breastfeed your child entirely, or are you using formula? Well, that's a failure. You're not a good mother. Are you able to cook all of your home meals organically? Or are you tapping into store-bought cereals? Well, that's a failure. So I think there are metrics, but they are metrics that are there and designed in a way to make you feel like you're not a good enough mother. And
Mhm.
then you hold that truth internally, which is not at all a truth really, but you tell yourself that's the truth alongside I'm also now failing at what I used to be so good at, which was my
Mhm.
career.
Yeah. Yeah. On top of everything else you have to deal with hormonally, like physiologically, it's almost like a shifting goalpost, one, in an uphill journey that is just draining us. Um, why do you think we attach this, I guess, sense of loss of self um, to our journeys of motherhood?
I think because there is a loss. But I would say that what matrescence hopefully will bring to others that it did to me is redefine that loss as growth.
Mhm.
Because you are a different person. You're not going to be able to do the same things you might have done in the past. Like in the past, I would just probably think about me, right? I would be able to go out when I wanted, whether that's for grocery shopping, whether that's for dinner. Um, Even from like a academic perspective, I could sit down and read for hours my research for PhD work, for whatever it was. It was very me centric. And of course, I have my partner, but still we were adult beings that we could control our life in a way that we wanted, kind of independently. But after motherhood, that me becomes we. Every decision, everything you're thinking about is entirely contingent on your child, on your children. Um, so I think that's an important thing to really realize is that yeah, there is a little bit of a sense of lost of your old me, but actually
Mhm.
there's a big gain because now we are a we, and there's a lot of growth as you explore what that we looks like for you and for your life.
Yeah. I like to think of it, I guess, not so much as a loss necessarily, and that's just me playing with language because it's important to how I kind of journey through. So I choose the word a letting go. I choose a release because, well, someone said to me a few years ago, you need to stop saying you want to lose weight because what do you do with anything you've lost? You go finding it, you go trying to find it back.
Mm,
So instead of saying that, I've lost my identity, I choose to say it's an identity that I've released or it's part of the journey that I've let go. And for me, that was really, really important because in every stage, as in every transition point, and do you know this, there is a letting go, but there's also a walking into, there is a welcoming, there's an opening, especially in our experiences of, becoming mothers. It's something, and I know this is not a blanket statement, but for those of us who are mothers, many of us, especially when we have prioritized our career for years, we got the education, we got the career, many of us are choosing this. We are
mhm.
choosing that, okay, this is the right time, other things have fallen in line. You're making the choice of motherhood. And then this. Than this. So my understanding then is in that choice, there should be a decision to find support, to seek support. Are you seeing women typically choosing to find support along their motherhood journeys?
Yeah. Well, one, I want to go back to the loss thing. I do love how your framing of it, and I appreciate you sharing that. That's really beautiful. And I'm gonna leave with that. So thank you for saying that. Um, it's helpful to know how different people think about different things. To your question about um, are women choosing support, I think a couple things. Number one, I think we place a lot of the burden of making these decisions on women, right? I can choose that I want support or I need support. That doesn't always translate into me having resources and access to support.
Mhm.
Um, a woman in a workplace can decide that, yeah, I need to step away. Is that opportunity? I need to step away. I need to scale back my work. Maybe I need to adjust the way I work to be in person or remote or whatever it is. We can design what support looks like, which is hard to get to on its own because often women don't even realize that they need support.
Mhm.
Um, because we aren't given the permission to do that, which I can speak to in a second. Um, but it's what we need to shift to is your village, your society, your workplaces being more proactive and recognizing proactively to support women, them choosing to support women versus women always choosing or deciding they need support. I think that's where we need
Mm.
to place the weight. Um, and then the second part of it is that messaging of, you know, superwoman and successful woman and good mother are so reinforced in us for so many years that we actually don't even recognize that it's time to raise your hand for support internally. We're burning out, we're depleting, all of these shifts are happening. I mean, matrescence comes with literally your brain matter changing, right? Like that is
Wow.
wild. Like the gray matter in your brain actually shifts and changes. Your brain scan pre motherhood and post motherhood, whether your journey involved being a birthing parent or not, changes. Primary
Mhm.
caregiving, like that is researched stuff. Um, so when we know we're changing so significantly from a skeletal brain, emotional cycle, all these levels, and that's met externally with, oh, you're a superwoman. You're doing it all. You're doing amazing. Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. It's very hard to recognize that, wait a minute, all of these things that are happening, this depletion, this burnout, when it's being externally validated as you being a super person, it's hard to know, like, wait, I need support. I'm drowning.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I guess putting your hand up to say you're drowning now comes at high risk
Such a high
because
risk.
not only do you potentially lose social status, how you're perceived might change negatively, but the woman who's in corporate and wants to ask for that accommodation might literally risk losing her job, not just a
Totally.
change in the role, but losing her job. So let's talk about that permission. Kind of you hinted at it just now. Where is she lacking permission? Is she not giving herself permission? Has society not given her permission? Where is the permission required?
I think both. I think it's and I'm still figuring pieces of this out as
We
I
all
navigate
are,
my own.
Ankita. We all are. Trust me. We will and have this entire life journey and not have it figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's I think if possible, if you can find that permission within yourself first, it is very
Yeah,
rewarding and calming.
yeah.
Um, when you learn to listen to yourself, to uplift your own voice, to recognize your own needs, and give yourself permission to rest, give yourself permission to value restoration the same way you do productivity and efficiency, comes power in being
Yes.
able to take a breath.
Yes.
And also, I think it's equally important for the people around you, including your workplace, to step in proactively. And that's where a lot of the work I want to be doing comes in is I want workplaces and managers and systems before you see a burnt out woman leaving the labor force because those numbers are wild these days.
Yeah.
Um, I want them to be able to step in and say, "Hey, okay, you're approaching going on your parental leave. Let me collaborate with you on how we can make that successful for you." I want it to be a bi-directional conversation, and that's where like
Mhm.
both pieces of it are important. Unfortunately, systematically, we aren't in a place where that's happening. It's not happening more often than it is. So at the very, least, I think we have to kind of reclaim that power and at least give ourselves permission first is a really beautiful thing to do for yourself if you're able to.
Yeah, it's compelling when we think that instead of a woman constantly having to put her hand up and saying, I need help or I need support, that the structures actually are in place to say, this is what we understand about your journey, what's coming up for you. Let's have that conversation proactively and know that there are options that are available to assist. I think it de-risks the conversation. Would you agree?
Totally. And it normalizes it. So it takes away from a lot of the isolation that women often feel as they enter into motherhood and return to work. They don't recognize that so many people are also experiencing it, navigating it because other high achieving women also haven't been given this permission. So they're
Mhm.
just suppressing all of that too. And they're showing up being super people and perfect in the workplace. And so shifting this kind of or shifting things in this kind of way helps normalize that, hey, things aren't going to be perfect. Things are going to be different. There are options for you. And that is so much more, that's like so much more, such a more healthy way of returning to work and balancing all of the things that we balance as women, both in the workplace and outside.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, this goes so much further than just normalizing a woman maybe pumping in the workplace or a woman or a company deciding, okay, we'll have daycare in the building. It goes so much further because a lot of times the support we need in addition to normalizing, these experiences that I just shared, we need that psychological support. We need the space so that we can actually hear ourselves think. We need the space so that we can actually, have wholesome experiences and normalize when it's not working. Normalize having the conversations that say, I'm struggling with my breastfeeding. Um, and all that means in our society. But I really want to touch on the idea of rest because I think somewhere in our, I guess, our conversations, how the term has evolved, people are equating rest to sleeping. And I think we're missing something vital if all rest is to us is sleeping. How do you see rest coming to life for that woman who is navigating matrescence?
Yeah. Well, sleep is important, but
A
it is not.
100%.
um, yeah, I think rest is what replenishes you, right? It's like understanding in the thick of early parenthood, sleep is not very accessible to you. So rest might not mean sleep, just as you said. But someone watch, maybe your partner, maybe your parents watching your baby for a half hour, you going on a walk, you
Mhm.
going to the grocery store. For me, it was literally, I would sometimes pick up takeout for our family that if we'd order takeout and it would be a 5 minute drive to whatever pizza place, whatever place it was. And I'd blast music to the top of my car and sing along. And that is far from rest, but it
Mhm.
was rest for me. It was
Yeah.
rest from the mental load, from the weight of doing all of those things internally and externally. So I think rest is really what serves you, and it could look
Yes.
look like a variety of things, including and excluding sleep for sure.
Yeah, it's that rejuvenation, it's that refueling,
Hmm.
it's that restoration. I remember the first time, this was years ago now, um, studying the work that I do, finances and all of that, but adding in the social and emotional aspects. I remembered saying to one of my clients at the time, I mean, you need time to rest from, revenue generating activities so that you can be restored and fulfilled and all of that. So why don't we book a spa? And she's like, a spa is not restful for me. A spa is not reju. She is such an extrovert that she actually gets energized through social interaction. So going away from social engagement is actually draining for her. She is fueled by, of course, curated for her, but she's fueled by this engagement. And I remembered thinking to myself after that conversation, I need to study more because everyone has such unique journeys. So, what is restorative to you? That's the thing you do. It might be music blasting from your car, knowing that in that 5 minutes, you get to make choices that are just about you.
Totally. And
It's just
I'll
you.
add totally, absolutely. And I'll add this. I think a lot of the moms that I've spoken to, um, rest is really like rest from briefly just said the mental load, and I'd love to expand on that. Women often find themselves carrying the mental load of not only like the breastfeeding and all of the things that come with motherhood, especially for birthing parents. And also there's often, I've talked to so many moms to know that they're the ones who feel the weight of organizing family trips, of planning the kids' meals, of figuring out all of the little Tetris pieces of not only their lives, but their kids' lives, of their partner's life, of how vacations work. So, um, if we're speaking to moms, I feel like rest is also your support team jumping in and saying, hey, I got this. Let me
Yeah.
plan this for you. Let me do this meal. That is so restoring for someone else to step in and take away some of that mental load. So thinking about that, I think could also be helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you have throughout our conversation been intentional to speak about birthing versus non-birthing parents. Do you find that the journey of matrescence is significantly different or entirely similar? How is that transition either, I guess, simplified or more strained if we look at the journey of a non-birthing parent's experience?
So, I guess unfortunately, there's not been that much research and study into some of the, matrescence is just now starting to get more research and more funding. Women's health,
Mhm.
um, is kind of seeing more of that. So there's not so much research and science yet. And also, fortunately, it is picking up. People are talking about it, people are studying it. So, while matrescence is being studied, there's also concepts of putrescence being studied for parents
Mhm.
that are secondary caregivers sometimes if they're male, or non-birthing caregivers. And what I've found in the limited research that I've looked into is that there is evidence that there are shifts that caregivers generally experience hormonally. So one thing I was reading was that for dads, for instance, they see or I can't now remember the exact study, but there was a study that showed that there was an uptick in their hormones in the same way that it was for birthing parents, because and it was
Wow.
especially for dads that spent like a significant amount of time in their child's life versus one that was maybe a little bit more removed. So I guess in short, there is some evidence to suggest for sure there are changes happening in non-birthing caregivers as well. It's just not super clear yet how much or what those changes look like.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine what that would be like because I think for a good portion of last summer, my mom was with me and I was navigating typically wife and mom most of my days. But when my mom came and was spending months with me, this was like a weekend drop-in. She came in because she lives out in another country. It was months, and I did experience a shift. And in exploring that change in my caregiving role, I don't know if there's a word for it because it's not me becoming a mom, but it was almost me momming my mom. It was a
Mm-hmm.
it was a whole thing, Ankita. Um, But I did realize that sitting and just examining what that experience was, I do realize now that as my mom got older, our positions, our roles have shifted. And now, whether she's sick or well, as long as she and I are both in the same space, something moves, something just shifts. I move into caregiver. That's not
Hmm.
to say she's not okay, but it's just a thing that has happened. And this is newer to me because my mom has been so well, so active, and all of that so for so long. So I bet that even in a non-birthing experience, I would definitely back that research that says physiologically, even if we haven't had a physical experience of birthing, there is a shift. And I think it's about time that we acknowledge it. I think it's about time that women realize this isn't in your head. This isn't
Hmm.
you being weird. This isn't you dropping the ball. This is literally a physiological change happening inside of you, and you are doing the best you can to walk through it with some measure of grace. So for you, based on your research, based on the clients that you have interacted with, based on maybe even your personal experiences, for the woman that is struggling in that transition through matrescence, what are some things that she can do to give herself grace and to manage this transition well?
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing about your mom. I can certainly relate. My mom and my parents both have lived on and off with us for the last year, and that comes with its own shifts and journeys. So definitely can relate and I feel that. Um, for the moms that are feeling all of this, what would I say to help them navigate and give grace? I would say for one, you just said it. I want them to hear that they are not alone and that this is so real and it is so profound. It is physiological and biological, and also it is social. Like who you talk to, who you hang out with, your friends, your village looks different. It's economical. For me, that looked like moving away from high, high finance corporate role to being part time and navigating motherhood that came with economical changes. It's managing cultural shifts, right? Like your mom might have expectations of what motherhood should mean for you. That might be different than what you feel motherhood should mean for you, or what your friends or what society, this current society you live with. Um, it could be spiritual, it could be political. So I just want I want women and moms to know that this is real and you are not changing in one area, you are changing everything. It's not just adding on mother, it's changing all aspects of your life. And that's why it's so overwhelming. So, for one, recognizing that internally and really sitting with it and recognizing how amazing you are to be even navigating all of that is crazy and amazing. um, Second, I think I would say I have found a lot of comfort in talking to other moms. I mean, I feel so seen by the mom community. And especially if you allow yourself to be vulnerable, which I did, right? I was very open and honest about sharing some of my struggles with my breastfeeding journey, about how I felt about my delivery. I really hoped for a vaginal birth. I didn't get that. I had an emergency C-section that came with a lot of trauma. And a lot of these things we internalize because we're so scared of exposing the realities of how we're experiencing motherhood, because society and our cultures haven't made it safe to share that they've been anything but miraculous.
Uh-huh.
So, number two, I want them to be a little bit vulnerable in sharing the realities and the struggles that they're experiencing, because I bet you if you share it with another mom, that mom's going to jump in and be like, girl, me too. I
Yes.
see you. And there is so much like joy and comfort I have found in finding my new village that is not only moms, but it's with people that I've been able to expose my vulnerabilities who have then taken it and like brought me in, shared their own personal stories and journeys. And there's a lot of community and comfort and strength that comes from that. Um, and third, it's not really to the moms, but I hope the support systems and villages out there are listening to this conversation because really I want them to hear, hey, she might look like a superwoman, like she's doing it all, but like check in on them and ask how they can be supported. A lot of times, the conversation in the workplace doesn't necessarily have to be like, we have all of the things figured out that you need. A lot of times moms just need the safe space to be asked like what do you need? And
Mhm.
it's okay if that changes. It's okay because your breastfeeding journey at the return of work is not going to look like it 6 months. Your needs are going to change. So don't just check in once, have that conversation be an ongoing open space and safe space for those moms to come to you and ask what they need and make sure to ask them and provide that space for them.
Yeah, normalize that conversation. Make it ongoing, not just one conversation that's supposed to take care of every iteration along the journey because by golly, like we were sharing before we started recording, I'm having a different experience at my level of motherhood. Matrescence is not just doesn't end after you become a mother. Matrescence seems to be that constantly evolving experience of motherhood because we transition through motherhood. There are different transition points. So I'm really glad that we can bring some light. We can start the conversation because I know there are so many things that we can still be talking about. There are so many discoveries that we are yet to make. And this conversation is far from exhaustive. But how would you, I guess, guide a woman in having the conversation, starting the conversation? Where does she start with her workplace or even with her partner? Because uh sometimes even Superwoman loves to put the cape down at some point. What is maybe a great starting point for these conversations?
Totally. So this isn't quite matrescence, but there's in workplace psychology, there's a model that I like to use in giving feedback. It's called the situation, behavioral, and impact model. And it's a safe way to basically share if someone made you feel bad instead of saying, hey, you made me feel bad, which feels, then that person's becoming going to be defensive. So
Hmm.
for instance, for a partner, if you're really struggling as a mom, this could be helpful. And one, you describe the situation, right? You can describe, hey, last night I was awake till 3 a.m. or whatever, feeding the baby. And it was, whatever. You can describe it factually. Um, then you say behavior and you describe the behavior of that person. And that might look like, I don't know, you were sleeping. Impact. That made me feel really bad. It made me feel isolated. So that way you're not, and that's like a safe way to share, hey, this is the situation that happened factually. This is how I behaved. This is how you behaved. You're not saying, it looked like you were angry. It looked like you didn't care about me and you went and slept. You just said, hey, you were sleeping. I was doing this. And impact, it landed on me this way. How can we shift that? So I feel like that has served me in workplaces where, for instance, if a manager um, is trying to give feedback to someone, I often use this model. So if maybe that something like that could be helpful in starting a conversation about this, especially because women often do feel resentment towards their partners because they're carrying a lot more of the weight than their
Right.
partners in times.
Mhm.
To start bringing that to light, not in a way that judges them or criticizes them, but simply talking about specific moments that impacted them in certain ways, and then collaboratively saying, hey, our collective outcome, our shared goal is for our child to be well, for me to get sleep, for you to get sleep, for our kid to get sleep. So, like, how could we work towards that? How can we shift? What does the ideal situation look like? What do our ideal behaviors look like? And how would that impact both of us?
That is powerful because it immediately neutralizes the combative response, and it simply says, "Well, here's my lived experience. Here's what happened. Here's what was going on. This is what I observed, and this is how it felt." Now you move on to, how can we do this together? I love that approach. And I think it would work actually across all of the intersectionalities, whether it's at work, with your partner, even with extended family, because sometimes they want to help, but turns out it might just be getting in the way, or it might not be as helpful as they think it is. We need to have permission to have these conversations, to explore the unique experiences we're each having as we transition into motherhood. Um, and we need to have permission to speak our truth, because that is our journey. You know what, Ankita, this has been great. Any final thoughts that we probably have not covered? Anything that you think you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
Um, yeah, I think the final thought and the nugget I would love to leave our high achieving women and your audience and listeners is um, this is a season of life, right? Matrescence is ever evolving, and that is going to show up in different ways in new motherhood, in later stages of motherhood, in even later grand, I call it grand matrescence for my mom. Um, so it's going to be something that's there forever
Mhm.
and show up in different ways. And also, these are seasons of life. So just because right now you can't be 100% at home with your child, 100% doing XYZ with your career, 100% building your business, whatever it is, just because you might need to shift and, readjust, know that that's serving this season. And maybe some of those other things, there will be space for it in the next chapter, in the next season. And that's really helped me recalibrate kind of what my goals are, what my priorities are right now, because there was a world when I wanted to be like, I wanted to build my business. I wanted to be a PhD student. I wanted to be 100% worker at the company. I wanted to be a mom, and it was overwhelming. But now I'm kind of picking and choosing. I'm pacing it as it suits me. And I know that some of those other things, maybe I can't do it right now, but that doesn't mean I can't do it ever. It means I'm just looking at it little seasons at a time.
Awesome. I love that perspective. I love that perspective. And Kita, where can our listeners interact with your work, with what you're doing, and probably start conversations with you directly?
Totally. I think the best way to reach out to me is via LinkedIn at the moment. So you can find me there. My name is Ankita Callahan. And as I am slowly honoring my season and building my matrescence niche and caregiving support in the workplace, you'll hear more updates there in terms of websites and social arms. But in the meantime, you can find and converse with me there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
I am excited to see more about matrescence as the clinical supports come in, as more research is done. I'm really excited to experience more about how we can support other women as they have their authentic, unique experiences of matrescence. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the space to have this conversation, to share matrescence with your audience, and just being such a lovely host. I revealed to you ahead of this podcast this was my first podcast, and it's been lovely. And I can't wait to have more conversations with you.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you to our audience. You know what? Ankita has shared so much with us today. She has given a name to the transition that so many of us feel, are feeling, or have felt, but so few of us discuss with such clinical and emotional clarity. To the woman that is listening who is feeling like she is regressing because her priorities have changed. You are not losing your edge. You are becoming a more integrated, powerful version of yourself. As Ankita reminded us, when we rest, we rise. When we align our wealth with our new identity, we literally become unstoppable. So be sure to connect with her on LinkedIn. It's Ankita Callahan. You will be able to engage with her posts, learn more about her coaching and her workforce strategy. And if you are ready to connect your financial life in such a way that you can respect and respond to your transitions, then be sure to go to my website, moneynavigator.ca. We are able to help you get some resources in hand so you can best support your matrescence, that transition for yourself. So I'm Hadriana Leo. I'm so happy to have had you be part of the conversation today from Ankita and myself. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Take care.